Hey guys, before we start, I did a pretty fun interview with Jez recently over on his channel talking about a bunch of Destiny topics, also some not Destiny stuff. You should go check that one out. Link is in the description. All right, let's talk about this dungeon. Bit different from the other dungeon that released this year, Duality. Bit shorter, still relatively sweet. We'll talk about the title of the video in a little bit. Main mechanic is essentially connect the dots. First time through, obviously there's a lot of exploration, searching for the nodes in order, which was kind of fun. But once people start to memorize all of these locations, the time spent in these fights is going to drop dramatically. If everyone gets assigned some nodes at the opener, you're done in like 30 seconds to a minute tops. First encounter, that's going to fly by. I think I did it where I was the only one hitting the nodes, going slowly for the purposes of making a video, and the whole thing was 6 minutes. So these encounters are not going to be taking very long at all to do, and I'm not still sure how to feel about that. I enjoy longer encounters, but only if I'm staying really engaged, only if the mechanics are tight and satisfying. And I think because the connect the dots mechanic is not the most engaging thing in the world, I don't really mind that those encounters are a bit on the shorter side. The first encounter ends as I'm tuning out, basically. But I think I would have liked to have seen an additional mechanic happening here, at least in the first looted encounter, something else to keep the engagement a little bit higher. The enemy density isn't too bad, I suppose, but considering how quickly people are going to be able to motor through this, besides the Minotaurs, you can probably ignore the majority of enemies. That or just a well-placed grenade clears up everything in an instant. I will say that having platforming be a part of the encounter itself is nice though, the physical feeling of progression, your character going up and up and up. Kel Echo has this a little bit, there's a bit of it in Grasp of Avarice, Duality has it a lot, so I'm pretty okay with that aspect. Second encounter, I sort of feel the same way. The catwalks are a pretty simple game of just memorize where the things are and then you're on your way to killing the boss. The boss, being more or less a direct copy of the garden boss, doesn't sit very well with me. I'm not really out here running gardens that often, so it's been a little bit since I fought this boss, but I have fought this boss dozens of times already. I don't like using the phrase copy-paste for video games, but this is the closest I have felt to wanting to use the phrase. At least give me a new boss here. It felt like this was a missed opportunity for a new boss, especially considering the final boss of this dungeon is a giant wyvern, even if it does have what maybe looks like a sort of updated, more boss-type look. I don't know, that just could be me. Enemy density here was also pretty good. There's enough to kill, but also enough that if you ignore things for too long, it is really going to stack up on you. The final boss is where things dramatically pick up for me, and this is where we get to the title of the video. Now, Keitel of Duality has a pretty long wind-up for what can amount to messing up for 5 seconds and then having to start all over again. Long mechanic phases that lead into short DPS windows can feel like a drag if you mess up. No one wants to fight ads for 5 to 6 minutes and then mess up a thing in the damage phase to get completely reset back to square one. It's a horrible feeling, even if the elitist in me just wants to say, just don't mess up, lol. It still feels bad, and if you don't mess up, having a poor damage phase can feel equally as bad because you know the trek back to a damage phase is gonna take a while. Seeing you only did like 15 to 20% damage is just brutal on the mental side of things. This boss has a short DPS window, but a short and intense mechanic phase. The combat is ridiculous in here. The boss is a complete menace, which means your team needs to stay a bit more split up. The enemies are relentlessly spawning, so you always need to be on your toes. This is where the memorization of the power nodes feels really good. There's so much going on around you that it's basically like a dance you perform to get where you need to go quickly. It feels really good to just tap a bunch of those panels, scoot your way around some supplicants, and get a power cable locked and loaded. And best of all, powering up a cable can be done in definitely less than 20 seconds if you're really fast and very capable. The mechanic phase can be so quick if you are good enough to make it that quick. And while the same can technically be said for Duality's final boss, it never really felt like that was the case. So if you do have a bad damage phase, which for some teams is bound to happen, getting back to a damage phase isn't this 5+ minute slog like it was in Duality. Other dungeons haven't really had this problem. Throne definitely did not. That boss fight was over in 2 minutes. Pit of Heresy, not really. Prophecy, not really. Grasp is also not really, but Duality is, yeah. I also really like encounters that have multiple significant rooms to them. I'm not talking like an offshoot room or a hidden side room that's used for a small thing. I'm talking stuff like this, where there are significant components in both rooms. I think I probably undersold how good rockets are on the final boss in my guide, even with the slightest bit of optimization. But if you're not able to deal around 50% of the boss's health on the first wave, it'll probably be a bit annoying to finish things off without some power ammo drop luck. Loot-wise, I think everyone is searching for a cowboy hat. Seems like people are really into that, which is cool. I think it looks kind of neat, but this is purely a subjective opinion. Talk of the town has got to be the scout rifle long arm, which is a legendary dead man's tale, basically. This one's arc, and my very first drop was rapid hit explosive payload, which I have been absolutely loving. Dead Man's Tale is a very fun weapon to use. Long arm is basically mechanically the same. It is quite strong. I have nothing but praise for it. We also have a sidearm that can get Headstone and Desperado at the same time if you want that. I got one with Perpetual Motion in Desperado. Look, talk to True Vanguard for your sidearm needs. I am not sidearm guy. I do not like sidearms, but people also seem to be going absolutely crazy for this thing. There's also the grenade launcher that shoots 2 grenades at the same time, which I found pretty interesting. But I don't think that there has been as much buzz about it other than that fact. So I definitely do want to experiment with it more. Special ammo GLs are definitely quite potent right now, although wave frames are more popular. But I still break out the old Salvager Salvo here and there, and that thing is still a beast. Then we have the 2 7th Seraph weapons, and when I saw that these were possible drops, wasn't really the most excited. These weapons, when they originally came out, intentionally released with perk pools that weren't that great because they can make Warmind cells, and Warmind cells back in Season 10, up until they were nerfed, were insanely powerful. So that was the trade-off that you were making. Warmind cells, no longer insanely powerful. Now the API is down for Destiny, and I don't know when it's coming back up, so I don't exactly know what the perk rolls these weapons can get are. So maybe there's some crazy perk combinations that these weapons can get, but I've never really been excited about using 7th Seraph weapons because they were always a means to an end. You tolerated them because they make big glowy ball and then ball go boom and then that gives my brain happy juice. It literally just might be the stigma of the weapons that turns me off from them, but you know, we'll see if my opinion changes down the road. Totally could. None of the dungeon weapons being craftable, for me, is actually coming as somewhat of a relief. There are so many weapon patterns in the game right now, and there were, what, 16 patterns introduced in Season of the Seraph, 10 of them within the season weapons, 6 of them reprised in Deepstone Crypt. Add on another 5 patterns from this dungeon, I would have gone crazy. Even though I don't even really do that much weapon crafting, and I try not to stress out about it. It's too much. Too many patterns. Just too many. I know they're all like technically separate things, like Deepstone is from Beyond Light, and then the season ones are from the season, and then this one's from the dungeon pass, but it's just all coming at the same time, and it's so much. Didn't get the exotic bow. What a surprise. So we'll have to wait on that. Probably make a video for it if I have enough to say. Heard that Tiku's was probably still better, but when I do end up getting this bow sometime in 2024, we will investigate. I also really haven't had a chance to dive into Master or do any solo stuff, but solo stuff I'll be working on in December. Hopefully have a little Flawless guide up at some point, but with no seasonal mods, so that way it'll be relevant all the time, no matter when you want to go do it. Although, this season, really good time to go do it. You have the solo operative mod, and then also weekend clear. Go do it this season. It's a good idea. Overall, I don't mind a shorter dungeon experience, but the final boss just being so intense and high action is really what saves the experience for me. And even with all the criticism I just gave this dungeon, I don't know, I still had fun running it. Like, good day one experience, good repeat experience so far, but I'm not sure how much of that is me having fun and how much of that is 2 of the 3 encounters are free loot. I get asked for my tier list on dungeons a lot and favorite dungeon, but I don't think I really have a favorite dungeon. It's tough for me to organize. I like the dungeons for different reasons, you know? Shattered Throne doesn't have a lot of combat depth, but it has awesome like atmosphere and setting. Grasp of Avarice, great theming, great setting, great first time playthrough. Prophecy is a challenging solo experience, fantastic visuals. Duality, super intense combat. Right now, community feedback is all over the place with this dungeon. There is very little consensus, but I think there's also very little consensus on what the best dungeon even is anyway. Right now, I think I'd have to put it in the middle of the pack if I rated it on a bunch of different scales, I guess. Like, setting-wise, environmentally, not really my cup of tea. I'm not the craziest Mars fan, but I enjoyed some of the platforming. I really enjoyed the final boss, although my initial impression on the solo experience, having literally done no solo stuff yet, is that this is probably going to feel like a slog, but we'll see how that goes. Let me know how you're feeling about the dungeon right now. Again, seems like opinions are all over the place. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time.